who lives here. Now there are towns where you can. You can in, say, Upland or Rancho or Corona on the western edge of the Inland Empire. You do have higher educations there, but the farther you go inland, the less that happens to be the case. And this has been the migration into higher end housing in the western part of the two counties. If you look at AA and above, you have 28.3 in Riverside, 26.9 in San Bernardino. It is over 40% in the coastal counties. So again, we are at a competitive disadvantage on that basis. What's going to go on with population growth here? Right now, we have a population of 4.4 million. These are the SCAG's most recent numbers in terms of what we anticipate seeing population growth between 2015 and 2040. Notice the Inland Empire is expected to add more people than LA County, but not only that, more than San Diego, Orange, Imperial, and Ventura combined. So this is where the population growth is going to land. In terms of job growth, our job growth is just a little less than LA and then that combination of the rest of the Southern California counties. So we will be doing pretty well on the job growth side, very well in terms of population growth. If we look at where we sit at the moment, our 4.46 million people just passed Kentucky at 4.43. All those red bars to the right are 25 states. So the Inland Empire has more people than half the states in the United States now. I've been waiting to say that at this conference for 10 years. Keep having babies. Notice who's behind Kentucky is Oregon. We have 4.46. Oregon has roughly 4 even. So we have almost 500,000 more people in the Inland Empire than the state of Oregon, to just put this stuff in context. It is quite amazing. In terms of income, we have $148 billion of total personal income in 2014. Who is just above us? Oregon. Who's behind us? Iowa. Now the Iowa caucuses are in a place that hasn't got the income of the Inland Empire. We need to cut this off and make our own state. Now, one of the reasons we can compete is people don't like to commute. Big shock. Any of you that go on the 91 or 15 south to San Diego or on the 210 or 10 or 60 going to LA County in the morning know what that's like. People therefore will work for a little less in this area. Now this chart was made up by looking at the median income of every occupation and then weighting it by the Inland Empire's amount of employment in each sector so that they're apples to apples in that respect. And you'll notice here, 38,995 is the median for all jobs, quite a bit below the coastal counties, 42, 41, and 41. We are between 6 and 8% cheaper than the coastal counties overall in terms of our labor force, which is one of the reasons companies will in fact consider us. Another reason they will consider us is the space here, whether you're a manufacturer or you are in logistics or you're in fulfillment dealing with e-commerce. Our median price on a monthly basis is 46 cents a square foot asking rate in December. Now, the other thing that's true of our facilities is they're taller. So the cubic space inside of them is about 20% higher than what you'll find in the coastal counties. So if you will make that allowance, our 46 cents, 85 cents is the equivalent in LA County, 90 cents is the equivalent in Orange, 98 in San Diego. So we are, those counties are 83.9 to 112% more expensive for space than in the Inland Empire. So you've got a labor cost advantage, you have a space cost advantage. Then we have Ontario International Airport, which thank God is finally free of LA, or will be shortly. Hooray for the city of Ontario today. You see here what has gone on with passenger traffic at Ontario International Airport. It built up to a peak of 7.21 million passengers in 2005, returned back to that in 2007, and then Gina Marie was put in charge of LAWA, and they decided to yank everything they could out of the Inland Empire to help fund expansions at LAX, and it dove all the way down to 3.37 million. They said, oh, this was the economy. Well, excuse me, right now we're back to 4.21. When was the last time it was that low? Back in 1986. How much has the economy grown since 1986? Answer, 120%. How much has population grown? 130%. How much has the number of companies grown? 85%. With all due respect, that argument coming out of LAWA wasn't just nonsense, it was an exercise in propaganda and, in fact, stupidity. Which, by the way, the LA Times, in its general way of doing things, of course, carried every time they spoke. Don't like that paper. There's a reporter for the LA Times, go home. Now, there is a test, and you have to pay for your lunch double if you can't pass it. What do we see? How does our economy operate? Well, something brings money into the region. Think of a Clint Eastwood movie in the Old West. A bunch of guys dig up gold, can't do much with it. So what do you do with it? You send it away, and it brings money to a place where there has been, in fact, no economy. Now the gold miners have money. What do they need? They need food and tools. So you end up with a general store. Nobody works in a general store unless the gold mine's bringing the money. What else do they need? Well, they need entertainment, so you have the saloon. Nobody works at the saloon unless, in fact, the gold miners are there. They have other needs. We shall skip that part of the speech. My wife has threatened to divorce me if I don't take that out of it. All right, now, what are our gold mines? What brings the money here from the outside world? Number one has been logistics and distribution, for which we have huge competitive advantages. Number two, the healthcare industry. Most of the money comes from the outside world. Number three has been construction, though of not so much residential as infrastructure and then large projects, be they large in the industrial field or in things like retailing. Number four, manufacturing. Big, again, huge sector, much stronger in the Inland Empire than almost anywhere else. And then we do have some high-end, and we'll be hearing a little bit about some of the high-end, one of the high-end companies today. Those companies bring money from the outside world. It gets here, and you then get the modern secondary tier. On the left, consumer services, on the right, retailing, which is about 44% of our economy. But the key to this is not the secondary tier, it is what's bringing the money in here. Now, switching now to the various sectors, one of the ones that does bring money in is, in fact, the government. What we see here is what's gone on with one of the two major areas that causes government to be able to fund itself, and that's assessed valuation. What you see for the two counties, it was $419 billion in 2008. It now is at $422 in January 1st of 2015. It's, however, only up 0.8%. Inflation between those 2 years was 8.6, so the purchasing power has in fact gone down still, despite the fact that the total amount is up. There's a difference between the two counties, and San Bernardino is up 2.8. Riverside County assessed valuation as of July 1st was still out down 0.8%. So that particular driver has been relatively weak. Second is taxable retail sales. Whether it's taxable sales when we go to Walmart, or when we go to Costco, or we go to any of the retail shops. What you see there is it peaked at $61.1 billion in 2006, fell off to only 45.6 during the recession in '09. It's now back to 68.8. So overall, it's up 12.6%. However, inflation's up 16.1, so it's not quite at the level at which you've kept up with inflation, but it's getting there. In the county, San Bernardino's closer, up 14.4, Riverside up 10.7. When we look at this particular part of the economy, given those numbers, it is not a surprise to find out from 2011 through 2015, which is the growth and expansion period, both the federal and state government employment in our region, as well as local government, is in fact down overall 5%. This is a good sector for our economy. It pays over $55,000, so people who work in the sector are in that upper part of it. $57,984 is in fact the median pay, which is strong, largely because an awful lot of people working in government have higher degrees. If we look going forward in 2016, my forecast that local will add about 1,200 jobs, and the original, the first 2 months of the year in that neighborhood, state and federal at about 500. Now to get into this in some more depth, I've asked John Russo, the new city manager, at least he's new until May, of the city of Riverside, to take a look at his city and what he's seen going on. And let me invite John to the stage and let's get into it.
Thank you, John. John asked me to speak a little bit about, to drill down a little bit for you, as far as how the city of Riverside has coped with the cycle that the Inland Empire has experienced in the past 8 or 9 years. And are we, in fact, over the Great Recession? And the answer is we're not. And that is a very difficult message to communicate politically. Now, here's what people hear. They hear last year that the city of Riverside's revenues, and by the way, just again to reiterate, I'm city manager for the city of Riverside, so I don't have the whole county. But the city of Riverside's revenues have recovered to pre-recessionary level. And that's true, and it has. As John has pointed out, that doesn't account necessarily for inflation, but let's put that aside. Unlike many of the other cities in the region, the city of Riverside was able to get through that recessionary period without large numbers of layoffs and service cuts. They were able to keep the machine running pretty much at the level it had been running. They couldn't do new things, although there is one little piece of capital expenditure that I'll come back to that ironically the recession actually helped the city of Riverside. I'll come back to it. But the city was able to keep body and soul together during 2008, 2009, 2010. No major layoffs of police officers, firefighters, etc. And you all know that because of California's insane tax system, the way municipal government has developed over the past 30 years is that the general fund of nearly every full-service city is about 70% police and fire and nothing else. It's 70% because everything else is off in other funds, which makes things extremely complex and non-transparent. So Riverside was able to get through. But how did Riverside get through those years? Well, there's basically 3 dodges that took place. And I don't mean this in any way to be critical of prior administrations. Frankly, if I had been running the city at that time, I might have done the same things to try to keep the institution together. Number 1, the city borrowed from itself. The city had a number of different funds. There's, for example, the sewer fund, the plug fund, the this fund, the that fund. Instead of making the cuts that would have had current expenses met by current revenues, the city borrowed from its internal funds. Now, to be fair, those funds are usually parked in the local agency investment fund, which pays less than 1% a year. And the general fund pays back those funds an interest equivalent to what those funds would have received had they been in the LAIF. So the fund isn't losing anything technically, but the money is being spent on one-time revenues outside there and has to be paid back at some juncture. When I arrived last May, I found that the city had borrowed about $30 million from its various funds. I insisted, and luckily the city council agreed unanimously, that that money had to be paid back, or we're merely operating on a cash basis. So there's a 5-year payback program that'll take care of about 85% of the payback, and then we'll deal with the rest of it when we get there. So that's one way Riverside got around it, but we still have to pay those loans back. Second, all of you who are in private business, nearly all of you, are dealing with the concept of depreciation. Depreciation is the way the tax code enables us to put money back into investing in our sort of capital assets. It's just an expression financially of the fact that all of us, and some like me who are clearly starting to feel a little older, it's a financial expression of the basic concept of entropy, that things break down. It's depreciating. Things depreciate over time. Well, each of you who are in private business has a reason to account for depreciation, because you're going to write it off when you pay your taxes. Those of us who are in government, the city of Riverside doesn't pay taxes. We eat your taxes. We don't pay, we take. Consequently, there's no financial reason why the cities, and this is not true merely of Riverside, this is true of every major city in California, why cities don't put money into sinking funds, because there's no financial outcome for it. And here's the reality. You can blame the politicians, but the problem really is all of us, and it's the public. And the reason is this. I challenge anyone in this room to ever tell me that they were at a budget hearing at any city in California where a large group of people organized, showed up at the meeting, pounded the podium and said, we don't need any more police, we don't need any more fire, we don't want more parks, put money in the bank. There's no constituency for it. And politicians, if you want to understand them, and I was one for 17 years in Oakland, which, by the way, John, I'll tell you, after being an elected official in Oakland for 17 years and then coming to Riverside is a little bit like going from combat to paintball. It's very different. Oakland is something else. And before any of you ask me, yes, the governor was my client when I was city attorney in Oakland. Very interesting client. So, look, depreciation has no constituency. It has no financial reason in the here and now. So it gets left because every politician, especially the young men, they're all on the ladder to absolute power over all living things. And so if something depreciates and breaks down, that's going to happen later when I've moved on to become, you know, an assembly member, state senator, governor, president, king of the universe. I know, by the way, I was that guy about 20 years ago, so I can say that. Nothing wrong with it, it just is. So there's no constituency for depreciation, and that's something that really goes lacking whenever the economy goes down. Whatever small discipline there is in the system for depreciation, that goes out the window. Last piece, the pension bomb that everyone is dealing with. Over the next 5 years, Riverside, the city of Riverside alone, will see an increase of nearly $15 million a year in its annual pension premium. Now that'll top out and it'll get better because the governor did a really good thing by forcing the legislature to change the formulas going forward. But we're not going to see that relief in any time that's going to matter in my career. So you're going to get that ramp up of about $15 million. The city had not planned for that at all and could not plan for it under the circumstances. Now I said earlier, and then I'm going to wrap up, I said earlier Riverside had benefited to some extent from the recession, and it did in this way. The city of Riverside spent over $1.5 billion from 2006 to 2011 on the so-called Riverside Renaissance. By the way, a fantastic public works program. they actually did use the money for capital expenses. And it has created a great platform for the future for the city of Riverside. Ironically, they planned it when the economy was booming, but they executed it while the economy was in the tank, and that meant there was less pressure on the cost. And so, unlike most government projects, for example, the Bay Bridge, unlike most government projects, the Riverside Renaissance came in on time and on budget, and that's a fabulous outcome, if you will, a silver lining in the cloud for all of us. Last thing I want to say is I really appreciate John's presentation, especially when he talks about skill sets, and he talks about educational attainment levels, and talks about the number of high-paying jobs. So I want to take this opportunity to brag on my city for a moment, and that is because just as I was coming here this morning, the California Air Resources Board voted 8-3 to build and to relocate their existing and expand their motor vehicle and engine emissions testing and research facility. They voted to move it from El Monte to Riverside. This represents a $366 million investment into the Riverside community. It's the addition of about 400 high-paying engineering and science jobs when the facility opens in 2020. The board chose Riverside over a proposed site at Cal Poly Pomona and decided that an 18-acre site on Iowa Avenue would provide the best growth opportunity and the best opportunity for collaboration with UC Riverside and our educational community. Our competitive advantage in the city of Riverside is that we have 4 excellent higher educational institutions. We would be foolish not to use the synergies that are available to try to change some of those difficult numbers that John has elaborated. So I'm happy to announce that. We're announcing it for the first time here. Happy that this was my first visit here and that I had such good news. I doubt I can repeat this next time you ask me, if you ask me. Anyway, thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, John. Okay, so we have a hole in our economy, as I indicated. That hole is exactly the one that John was talking about, having a little piece of it filled with the very high-end sectors that pay really well. Now, up here are the pictures of specifically 3 entrepreneurs. Jack Dangerman in Redlands, who started in his garage and created geographic information systems. Jack has over 2,000 high-end programmers working in the city of Redlands as a consequence of that. Gordon Bournes Electronics in Riverside, again, a locally founded and expansive engineering firm. Then you have Ahmed Abdel Al-Khatib, and I think I actually said that right for the first time, who started SigmaNet over in Diamond Bar, ran out of space, and is relocated now into the Inland Empire with a high-end company that has 2 unusual characteristics in its staff. Number 1, they all understand programming. Number 2, they actually speak the English language. If you've ever dealt with programmers, you know exactly what I'm referring to there. Then we have down in the Temecula Marietta area, Abbott Vascular, again, a very high-end operation. So it's not none